Most ceilings are higher than this, and usually they're about this much higher. And I use my Stiltz. These stilts right here whenever I do skip trowel or maybe painting along the edges and things like that. Because the ceiling is lower, if I put these stilts on, my head will be basically in the ceiling. And I can't work like that, and I can't adjust them any lower than that. So I made a new set of stilts. And you can see how much shorter these are. This is the perfect height right here for this room, and this is the perfect height for me on a normal ceiling height. So I'm going to show you how I made these. Really inexpensively, and they work really good. And most of this is pretty self-explanatory. I took a 2x4 for the bottom. That's for the shoe. It's about the same length as my normal shoe. And then I put a 2x4 on the back side, but I actually ripped this one so it's a 1x3 only because I wanted it a little bit thinner. I didn't want to make it any heavier than it had to be. So you could make it out of 2x4, you can even make it out of 1x4. It'd probably be strong enough. But I made it out of a 2x3 that I cut. And the platform I have my shoe bolted onto is just a piece of 2x6. And again, I made it about the size of my shoe. This little piece on the back is not needed. I stuck it on there because originally I wasn't going to bolt my sneaker to the platform. I was just going to tie it on. And then I thought, well, heck, a bolted on sneaker is much better than just tying it on, less likely to slip. So what I did here is I just ran a screw with a washer underneath an insert that I have. That way I'm not actually stepping directly onto the screw on the inside. I don't know if you can see that, but there's one in the heel and there's one up here. I had to unlace the shoe, pull the tongue out in order to get far enough up into the shoe to get it where I felt it was secure. What I did to decide on the height of this is I basically measured my foot and I wanted this to be just a little bit below my knee, and that's the height I used. This top little extra brace here, you probably don't even need it. I could have just tied it on, but I felt a lot more secure having some kind of like little wedge area that my leg would kind of fit into. It just feels more secure. And I cut it out of a piece of PVC pipe, 4 inches thick. I just ripped half of it, and then I turned it over and ripped the other half, and I cut whatever length I needed, which in this case is about 3 inches, 2.5 inches. When I cut this, I used a table saw, set the fence up so it's about halfway through, and basically just ran it through a little bit past where I needed to go, turned it over, cut mark at the top, and I just ran it through again, and then I basically cut off about 3 inches just like that. On one side, turned it over, and did the same on the other side, and that's how I got the pieces for the top edge. I attached it by, I happened to just find a piece of aluminum laying around that had a little bit of padding on it. It just happened to be the right length, but you could have used anything. You could actually have just used a couple of screws right through the middle of this with a fender washer on it, which is a big washer with a small hole. And then I used a piece of rope that I found. Nothing fancy, just something big and fairly soft. You could use a belt or anything like that, but I attached it on the back. That way I won't be looking for it all the time. And once you put your foot in here, you just tie it up, you know, around. I actually prefer a double knot, which is 2 wraps around, pulled fairly tight, and then doing the same thing again once, twice, and pulling tight. The reason I do it that way, it's really easy to untie when you want to take the shoes off. If I do a normal knot, which is, you know, once around, pull tight, it's easier to get a tighter spot. And like this, but a lot of times these are a little bit harder. Once you pull them real tight, they're harder to get undone. That extra twist makes it a lot easier to take them off. Just something I found out of past experience. Now, ideally, a belt or a strap with a quick disconnect or something that you could cinch up would be better than tying it, but this is what I had laying around, and of course the goal of this Stiltz was to make it as inexpensive as possible. Now I did find when I made this and started using it that these things here really gouged into my legs a little bit. So I sanded them a little bit rounded, and that still kind of hurt after a while because I actually wore them for several hours. So I picked up a sponge, just a normal tile sponge for doing grout and cleaning up. I put the sponge between my leg and this and tied in, and that actually made it very comfortable to wear. And so I recommend something like this, or else go ahead and tape something on this, maybe some pieces of foam or anything. Just tape, wrap around the edges of this, and it will make it much more comfortable. I use these little 3-inch deck screws, and I usually pre-drilled through the pieces of wood that I'm attaching. The foot I screwed on with 2 screws in the bottom, pre-drilling this and screwing right into the bottom of this. And then when I had, and also screwed into the back side of this support piece going all the way up, the 2x3, screwed in with 3 screws into this, so that this and this are really secure. Then I placed this piece of wood, the foot step, whatever you want to call it, my foot is resting on. I have 2 or 3 screws in the top going down into this piece here, the 2x6 side, and I also have one of them going through the back here to keep it from pivoting down. When I attached the shoe, I used 1.5-inch screws, deck screws, through a fender washer. The reason I used the 2x6 here was I wanted to have enough support that it wouldn't pivot back and forth and on whatever. I could have probably got away with using a 2x4 here, but to me it was safer to use a 2x6 just to make it more rigid. I also decided, since I wear stilts all the time and I'm used to walking on stilts and my balance is pretty decent, that I could probably make my foot a little bit smaller, probably knock an inch off or so. That would probably make my steps a little easier to walk on. Most real stilts have springs in them, and your ankles actually bend. Now it's off the ground here, and as I push down it springs down. Well, these other ones don't do that, so it's a stiffer walk. But I think if the shoe was just a hair smaller, it might be a little harder to get used to your balance. But once you get it figured out, it's probably a much more efficient pair of stilts. But for what I was doing, I felt totally safe on this, and it probably cost less than $10 to make. And because I was a little worried about this possibly slipping on the floor, I took a tube of shoe goop, which is kind of like a little bit like rubber, and I ran a little tiny bead across, going different directions on it, like a crosshatch pattern. You really can't see it now, but I put this on. You could use anything. You could even nail some plastic or rubber, maybe off of an inner tube or anything, to give it a little bit of traction on the bottom. If you like my videos, please subscribe and like or make a couple comments on a couple.